Hello and welcome everyone listening to and watching this new series of 2020 Coaching Convos with me, Julie Crabb. So, here in series 5, called Case by Case, I'm hosting conversations with guest coaches to talk about reflections from cases in their coaching practice. And before we start proper, I know I've mentioned this in previous series 5 introductions, but it's so important, I'm going to say it again, that in our conversations, we will be sure to uphold confidentiality in relation to our clients in everything. It's a really fundamental practice, a fundamental element of professional coaching practice and of our ethics and our values. So that's what we will do. So, you might hear us share information in the conversation, but it won't be in any way attributable to any individual that we've worked with. So we coaches, we are lifelong learners. We're always looking to develop ourselves in order to understand ourselves and other people and our relationship to other people better. And there's so much to be discovered about working with people that we coach. So this is case by case. We're exploring what's been learned, and it might be from a single case study, or it might be from a type of technique or practice that the guest is keen to explore. And this week, my guest is Amanda Connolly. She is a career coach for menopausal women, slash HR consultant, slash speaker. And her LinkedIn profile says that she helps women reclaim confidence, purpose, and possibility in midlife. I love that. She's had an interesting career journey in HR. As a people and culture consultant for over 25 years and a trainer and coach for over 15 years. It's a seriously impressive CV, though I'll let her tell her own story in a bit more detail. So welcome, Amanda Connolly.
Thank you, Julie Crabb, for inviting me on to your fantastic podcast. It's a pleasure to be here.
You're very most welcome. You're most welcome. And I forgot to say, your business is called Pause and Empower. I just love that title. It's brilliant. How did you arrive at that?
I cheated. I'm not good. Authenticity is one of my key values, and I'm not that imaginative, to be honest. Like, I'm pragmatic. I'm good with people, but in terms of my sort of creativity skills, I'm no marketeer. So I did throw it out, chat GPT, give me some options, and it popped up, and I just thought that's the one. So yeah, I can't take credit for that one. That's chat GPT, unfortunately.
Perfect. No shame in that. And we can't be good at everything, can we? So I realized when I looked at our kind of comparative profiles, we've had potential to meet previously, Amanda, in each of our educational paths at
Right.
both Middlesex University and the Coaching Academy, but we've not actually met until recently.
Yeah.
And having just spoken with you just once, I think let's add something in here that I haven't mentioned to other coaches, but because we've only got 20 minutes, this is something that happens in coaching sessions sometimes. I may ask your permission to interrupt if I feel like we're kind of heading off topic and there's something that I can see is really fascinating to ask.
Absolutely.
Is that okay? Good,
That's
good, good.
absolutely fine. Yeah, absolutely,
Lovely.
Julie.
So here's my awful three-headed question to start with. Could we hear briefly how you became attracted to coaching, Amanda, and where you are now with your coaching and what your intentions are in the future? So that's three and one.
Yeah, sure. I'll try to answer them as concisely as I can within 20 minutes. My journey into coaching came out of personal necessity, really. Like you'd mentioned, I'd spent over 25 years as a career HR consultant, and that's probably, I'm an FC CIPD, but it's probably got to do with my tenure rather than my ability. When you stay in an industry long enough, you start getting awards for things. So yeah, then and I hit perimenopause. And I really found myself struggling to sustain demanding contracts. Now, all of my contracts were quite fast paced within digital environments, but I just wasn't, I didn't know what was wrong with me. I did think I was going through early onset dementia because I just couldn't
Right.
remember things. And I was getting confused quite a lot. I didn't know what it was, and my doctor wasn't much use, to be honest. They put me on antidepressants, but it was only really when I sort of started working with a coach myself, I was a contractor and I wasn't getting contracts. So I thought something needs to change. I hired a coach myself, and I just thought that's what I want to be doing, supporting women specifically that are struggling like myself. So yeah, I wanted to not only do I want to gain clarity and compassion for myself, but that light bulb moment of this is what I wanted to do was really empowering and freeing. So then I went away and joined the coaching academy and spent just over a year training in their personal development coaching and set up Pause and Empower. There's a real focus on niching when you're in coaching, sort of you can't help the whole world. Who do you want your perfect client to be? Well, I'd kind of came into this knowing that I wanted to help people like myself, people that had had good careers but hit menopause and were having a wobble. And I couldn't believe how many women were in that situation when I started to talk about it openly myself. You know, even my closest friends had been struggling but hadn't been saying anything. So once I realized it was menopausal, which I did sort of quite soon after joining the coaching academy, I realized I was perimenopausal, and that was definitely where I wanted to be. Now I work with midlife women who are juggling identity shifts, work instability, and physical or emotional changes, helping them to gain clarity, confidence, and choice. It's so lovely taking a woman with you on that journey of, sort of them rediscovering themselves, really, rediscovering the skill set they had, what value they can bring to a business. And it is plentiful when you start digging deep.
Mm,
So that's kind of where I'm at the moment. Is my plan is to very much focus on that one-to-one support. I may, sort of I've got quite a few speaking engagements coming up, which I'll talk about in a minute. And it might be something I go towards, but at the moment my instinct tells me that I need to support women like myself because there just isn't enough support out there for us.
That is fascinating, and it's reminded me when I was in full-time work that actually there was very little support for people who were struggling with menopause. I just remember one lone voice actually in one of my teams asking for some support, and there was nothing available in a corporate way. Mm,
You have to be so brave to ask because although the menopause now, with all its red washing, it's everywhere we look. Um, Within business, it's not really embedded. So when you've got a progressive organization, they'll talk to you as an individual, and that will be the case in whatever situation you're appearing in. But for most organizations that have a handbook and people that are trying to work through how do I deal with this, menopause isn't on there. So for a woman to actually go and say, I'm menopausal, I need some reasonable adjustments, you know, so that's part of the reason why I bring in a little bit of mentoring into my coaching relationships because I'm still being trained in HR. I'm still attending courses. I'm aware of the legal changes that are happening next year. And my position is all about trying to help women have those conversations and advocating for themselves. And I think there does need to be a bit of, although I love the coaching aspect, the mentoring aspect alongside that is very, very useful when I'm working in an HR environment.
mm. Yeah. I made a mental note to myself actually that when you first started speaking, you were incredibly humble about the awards that you've won. I think that's worth anybody curious about what you've been up to have a look at. But also I think this blending between different styles of working, like coaching and mentoring, is becoming much more topical at the moment. So tell us a little bit about the speaking consignments that you've got.
Well, generally it's all around the menopausal and women's health generally. I connected with Audrey Tang, who's a chartered psychologist and trainer. She's a TEDx performer, and you should definitely check out her TEDx speech brilliantly. She's well, I know her because she runs a local media group that focus on well-being, and that's on an online platform. She's a multi-award winning author and an arts charity founder with Wellbeing Media. So she's having me on her podcast in September to talk about women and health, and it really women and health in the workplace, and that is very much should be, I'm hoping, a practical sort of session where people can understand what their rights are and how they can position themselves to get what they want. So hopefully that'll be really informative for a lot of people. And that'll be not specifically around menopause, but actually through the sort of, the female cycle. So everything from menstrual issues to pregnancy, sort of stillborn and things like that. So these things are really, really quite personal and quite sensitive. So it's really important that people understand what their rights are around them, I think. So that's the first thing I'm doing. Then I'm speaking at the Age of Love Menopause Matters conference in the Elgar Centre of Northampton on the 13th of September. Tickets still available. And I've also been booked to speak at the Bedford Women's Circle, which is a networking group run by Anne Schultz, a hormonal massage therapist, and Jen McMahon, a joy coach. She was my first joy coach I've ever experienced, and she's a lovely, lovely woman. So you can see where the joy comes from. And that's going to be on the 28th of November, again around female empowerment. So lots of interesting speaking engagements, I hope.
Yeah, sounds really exciting. A joy coach is something I've never come across, so that sounds fascinating too.
I can definitely share her information with you, Julie.
That would be great. That would be great. Okay, so focusing on our specific case then, Amanda, I'm interested to see what we can know about in the situation you're bringing. And it might be about the client and their role in the coaching process. It might be about coaching skills and techniques. It might be about your special and personalized style as a coach or the session journey or anything like that. So you've got a particular case study in mind that you want to bring that's left a strong impression on you.
Definitely, I do have, yeah. So,
Mm.
one woman in particular stands out for me. She was in her early 50s, perimenopausal, and she'd been with the same organization for most of her working life. She was loyal, competent, and well regarded, but felt invisible and unable to progress, which I think happens to older women generally, but particularly around the menopausal years. I think our emotions kind of heightened that invisibility. The menopause symptoms had really knocked her confidence, and she internalized the belief that she was past it. So through our coaching sessions, we explored those limiting beliefs, and I gently challenged them. Sometimes not so gently. I'm not the softest, fluffiest coach in the world. I'm quite a straight talker, and my clients tend to like that. Obviously, I'll always get permission for that sort of directness and, sort of asking them for that. But that is sort of my preferred sort of style. It's sort of just sort of saying it. So I really could challenge her negative self-belief in a very practical way. I could see her perspective shift as she began to recognize her own value. And that was really lovely. Sort of, she was a very skilled woman. She had a lot of experience that would have made the perfect management position, but she wasn't really expecting that for herself, which was a little bit disappointing when we first started. Obviously, I knew what she wanted to achieve, and I was really committed to helping her get there. I did bring in, like I mentioned, some mentoring at a key point, which was looking, using my HR background and understanding the language and skills that employers look for in leadership roles. She was I guess you'd call her a supervisor, and she wanted to move up into a manager role, much more structured, chunkier pay packet and all of that. And she did have a lot of those skill sets within her sort of experience. And I thought the hybrid approach, blending coaching with a bit of strategic advice, helped her land a promotion a couple of months later. It didn't take long. I think the nice thing about the women that I work with is they are very proactive in doing the work themselves. You sort of have these sessions, and there's always something to go away on and work on for the client. And she was very keen to sort of expand on what she was doing constantly. So I would never say, come to me, I can guarantee you a promotion in a couple of months. But I think that she was already in a position where, she was undertaking lots of work for other people and management levels. And, once she had the skill set, once she had the belief that she could have these conversations and apply for things that she wouldn't usually apply for, then it kind of just happened very quickly for her, which was really lovely. And what left a lasting impression on me was her transformation, not necessarily the outcome, but the way she started to advocate for herself, set boundaries, and a sense of calm authority that she brought into her work. The power of coaching when it meets someone at exactly the right time is absolutely mind blowing, isn't it? And, sort of, I was really pleased. And I don't think it just sits within the work environment once you've given people that, sort of confidence back. It absolutely sort of transfers into their work, their home life, their relationships. So yeah, I was really pleased with that case.
Yeah, that sounds quite a dramatic transformation and in quite a short space of time too. And a thank you for reminding me. I love being reminded of that notion that when change occurs for a client or even for us, it doesn't just affect how we are with ourselves, but also that ripple effect out into different layers, um, with people and with the environment in which we live and work. Yeah.
Yeah, I
It,
think so.
Go on.
One of the things that we looked at was sort of empathy, and she was very keen to undertake some trainings. I recommended some online training for her, and sort of coming back from that, you could see that she had a different approach to how she was talking to her staff. But also, I definitely picked up that she was having much more productive conversations with her kids as well, which was
Interesting.
really lovely.
Yes, it was truly rippling out.
Absolutely.
Could we go back to, you mentioned invisibility as kind of a common experience for people who are menopausal and starting to feel like, I can't remember the phrase you used, but something like, they just haven't got it in them. Um,
Being past it.
Being past it, that's
Actually
it.
past
Yeah.
it. I know it's a horrible phrase, isn't it? But it's one that we all, I think, so many of us, when our confidence is knocked, we just don't think that we're deserving of those, sort of those that praise, those promotions, that advancement. We're just not, So I think shaking people and making them see what their own value
Mm,
is just for me, it's a really empowering sort of part of coaching for me
mm,
personally, helping them
yes.
discover rediscover their own value because it's a temporary glitch, this menopause carry on. So, peri-menopausal post, it doesn't go on forever. Some people don't really experience it, but those that are experiencing it, that lack of confidence and that inability to sort of value yourself seems to be really commonplace. I think with all of the symptoms are plentiful, and I think when you have just a couple of them, that will have an impact on you because you're not the person that you were 10 years ago, and you're not the person you're going to be in another 10 years. But right now, you're on a bit of a wobble, and it's okay to wobble. The question is, how do we work with that to make sure that our employers are supporting us, our families understand, and then we can move forward in our life while going through this temporary phase?
Yeah. Yeah. That's an important thing to remember, the temporary phase element. So,
So,
with the invisibility, you mentioned emotions and you mentioned beliefs. What are the things in the environment and with our relationships with people that can make us feel invisible or lead us to believe that we are invisible or past it?
well, that's a really challenging question, actually, Julie, because I think there's lots of different people that can have an impact on you. I think the people that we're around most of all, I think, can take us for granted. I think that if you're a family woman and you've got teenagers don't appreciate anything anyway. But sort of going through menopause and having teens is what I think one of the most challenging sort of times for a woman that's experiencing menopause if they got kids. And I think that sort of having those people around you, the people that are in your work, not necessarily coming to you for advice or not involving you in conversations, it's a bit of a catch-22. You feel unconfident, so you sort of take a step back and then you stop being involved. So, really, for me, it was about her stepping up and using the skill set she had to support other people. And through that, she became a lot more visible to the right people, to the decision makers. So although, I think that there is definitely impact on our sort of home life and our friendships because you learn to be boundaried, I think, as well when you're going through coaching. That's something I definitely picked up when I was getting my coaching was the relate I had the relationships in my life that I allowed to have in my life. And that's a big thing. I think when we realize that actually we are controlling our own destiny, sort of we decide who we have in our life, when we have in our life, and how they speak to us. Because you can have a conversation around someone not talking to you in a particular sort of in a negative way, and you can do that diplomatically. But I think when you're feeling like you're invisible, you're not capable of having those conversations. So I think by challenging their negative self-belief and reminding them, having them remind me or remind themselves and tell me about their skills and experience, that invisibility seems to dissipate within the coaching relationship. And I don't think it's long because you're taking out, their homework, shall we say, the work that people do around the coaching sessions. That's obviously in the real world. So although they're feeling a lot more seen within our relationship, I do think that dissipates out into their life and their working world because they're using the learnings from our session to bring out into the world. So I think it's more a case of people realize they're not invisible, therefore they're not invisible because they're a lot more comfortable speaking up and advocating for themselves.
Mm. And I think that's a really interesting description of how things work in coaching for somebody who's not experienced it, that almost it's a place to test out being different in a relationship that you can then take out into the whatever aspect of your life that you're finding particularly challenging.
And
Yeah.
it's not just about, sort of changing yourself. It's about what life do you want?
Uh-huh.
How do you want to be? How would you like to be seen? How would you like to interact with people? This is our relationship, our coaching relationship. It's all about you and what you would like to achieve. So what would you like to be like? How do you want to be? And how do we get there for you?
Mhm.
How do you get there for yourself?
Yes. You mentioned too about the choosing of the relationships, and that's important too, isn't it? Reminding ourselves that actually what we've got isn't what we're stuck with. We can
Absolutely.
make a change. We can. There are always options. There are always alternatives.
Yeah.
So, without wanting to put you on the spot, Amanda, with the case study that you brought, is there a way in which you can describe confidentially or with confidentiality how you went about challenging this lady's beliefs?
Yeah, so what really stood out about this case, there were two things really. One was the blending coaching and the mentoring. Now, I think that we can always challenge people's negative self-beliefs, so just asking them what evidence they have for things. Why do you think that? Sort of, who's told you that in the past? And quite often it will be a case of no one. They have picked this up just because they are, sort of short of confidence and they just don't think they can do things. And when you sort of ask them why you think like that, give me some evidence. And when they really think about it, it's the fact that there isn't any evidence. So I think the mentoring also helps because I can sort of come from it from a head of HR, a HR consultant role, and sort of advise them on what I would expect to see within certain roles that they're applying for. So there was a little bit of, you know, but I've already spoken to them and I know what their, sort of personalities are like. So I'd very much focus on the skill sets that would be beneficial in that future role and really sort of play that up a little bit and make sure they understand how good a fit they were for things. So
Mm,
the blending of the coaching and mentoring, that was, I thought that was pretty, sort of significant within this role. It is in coaching, we often hold back from advising, and sometimes, especially when women whose confidence has taken a hit, a touch of mentoring at the right moment can be an absolute gift. But it is all about maintaining clear boundaries, being transparent when you're wearing your coaching hat and when you're wearing your mentoring hat. That is
mm,
super important. And it's always returning to the power of the client. Doesn't matter if I'm mentoring or coaching, you have the power to control this conversation, control your, sort of your narrative yourself. And the second thing that I sort of was particularly struck by was how limiting her negative self-beliefs were, the self-limiting narratives. Oh, my client's beliefs that she was no longer leadership material wasn't based on any real feedback, just years of feeling unseen and overwhelmed. I say years, I think that she'd probably been menopausal for maybe 3 or 4 years, and this was something that she'd been focused on for the last couple of years. So I think once you decide that you want to do something, but you don't think it's right for you, you can kind of sometimes dwell on it a little bit. And I think that really fosters your negative self-belief.
mhm,
So it reminded me of how vital it was to create a safe, non-judgmental space where clients can test, like you said, test new ways of thinking and rediscover their voices. So it was about giving her the option of, sometimes we do role plays. Just I love it. HR, I love a bit of a role play. Sort of problematic employees and how would you deal with those sorts of situations. So it's not that was in either coaching or mentoring. It was just a bit of fun that we were doing outside of sort of the structured process, just to give her some extra confidence really on how she was dealing with things. So I
Mm.
think it's really difficult. It's really important that you give them that non-judgmental space because they don't want, even when you're having a coaching session, you don't want to look stupid. You don't want people don't want to feel like they're asking daft questions. Now we all know in coaching there are no daft questions, unless you're asking it for the 50th time and you learn. But no, there's generally no, like, because you've got to explore things, you've got to trial things, and I think having that space to do it in absolutely helped her enormously. It also reinforced the trust that sits at the heart of the coaching relationship. Confidentiality, mutual respect, and a clear coaching agreement allows us to explore difficult topics in a way that felt empowering, not exposing.
That's an interesting phrase, actually. Empowering, not exposing. I love that. Okay. And you mentioned with this particular client, there were things that you kind of, I think you described as homework, things that you kind of gave her to do to go away and test out or practice. Could you give an example of what kind of thing that might be?
Well, by and large, it's driven by the client. She's come with some objectives that she wants to achieve, and I would say, sort of at the end of the coaching session, you come up with some steps to get there. So, what around those steps does she need to sort of work on between now and the next session to demonstrate and move forward? So, there were occasions where I'd sort of have my mentoring hat on and we'd do sort of role plays and just give people additional confidence. But generally, all the activities that she gave herself, they were all her ideas. And that's the whole point of the relationship, isn't it? If I was giving her things to do, that wouldn't be coaching, that would be mentoring, bossing them around. But actually, I can't decide what the priority is for you. So you need to know what you need to work on and you need to know what the steps are to achieve it. So my role as coach is just highlighting those steps, asking you enough questions so you're discovering them yourself, I believe.
Hmm. Brilliant. Thank you for that. So let's just take a pause there for a moment and just apply a simple skill that I think all coaches learn as part of their practice, and that's of summarizing. So if you've said so much that's of great value, Amanda, not just about your particular niche, but generally about the practice of coaching. There's some real gems in there. But if you were to pull out perhaps three key things that were instructive to you about coaching when you coach this particular client, what three things would they be?
So what do you mean instructive?
Instructive to you as a coach. What did you pull out? What did you reflect on? What were the big learning takeaways for you? I hate that word actually, but what did you what did you
What's
what have
three?
you hung on to, if you like?
I think one would be there were points where I was getting quite frustrated by her what I perceived to be negativity initially. Obviously, it was her negative self-beliefs, but they were so well embedded that it didn't seem to be matter what sort of questions I asked. They were very difficult to shift. So I think reframing those, trying different approaches, using different terminology to really make her understand what I was sort of like trying to achieve by asking these questions, that did help. But so the patience aspect there, that was quite, that was quite, that was quite a good thing for me to sort of learn. Only because you don't always get it right the first time, sort of when
Mm,
you ask a question, it's not always going to be landing with the clients. And it took probably 2 to 3 sessions, really, for us to really get to the heart of that negative self-belief and to turn them around, which was probably longer than I was used to. So that the patience that I needed to make sure I was trying to pull out these negative self-beliefs and see her understand what they were, that was probably a big one. Um, what instructional?
doesn't have to be three. That there might just be some ones that come to mind and are significant to you.
I think that obviously, as the listening skill was super important, and it's always important in a coaching relationship, isn't it? But I think that with this particular client, what I realized within a session or two was there was quite a lot that was unsaid. So I needed to be particularly on the ball with my listening skills to pick up those nuanced answers because they would often develop into something that was quite significant. So yeah, obviously listening. I'm saying all the obvious stuff, aren't I? Listening and sort of being in a safe environment. Um, well, I'm not really sure, to be honest. It feels
And
so
maybe if I
organic.
ask it in a different way, and what prompted you to choose this particular case study, perhaps to bring as an example of one that's particular interest to you? You mentioned her transformation and
Yeah, and that was a big thing for me. And it
mm,
wasn't necessarily, I mean, the promotion, like a couple of months after we'd finished, was just the icing on the cake, really. Because when I talked to her at the end of our relation, or sort of like after the sessions had finished, it was like talking to a different person.
mm,
And you know that that's not because of what you've asked. Well, there is a sense of you've asked them the right questions that has given them sort of a little bit of a wake up sort of moment. But this is them doing all the work. You're not doing the work. You're bringing the process, and they're bringing all the magic. So the fact that she'd never had a coach before, she didn't really understand the coaching relationship at first. There was lots of tell me what to do, tell me what to do. So we had quite a lot of work to reframe that process and make sure she understood that although I'd be mentoring in certain elements, I'd make it clear. Generally set up a whole session that's going to be mentoring, so then it doesn't sort of slide into the coaching. But sort of seeing how happy she was. She wasn't very happy when we started working together, and that empowerment that she'd brought out of herself and the relationships and the conversations having with her kids and her husband that she'd tell me about, super healthy. And she'd never been a particularly passive person, but she seemed to be enjoying so much more of life now. So that felt really good around sort of, sort of, there was a lot of challenging of the negative self-beliefs. There was a lot of reframing how she was thinking. There was a lot of, sort of making sure she understood what her value was. And that was, I think, more than most other sort of clients that I've worked with, she was quite resistant to that at first. So I guess the relationship felt so much better because at the end of it, she was one of the most proactive clients that I'd ever had, one of the most, positive clients that I'd ever had. And seeing that turnaround, yeah, there is a little bit of, oh, yeah, you've done that all right, Amanda. But then there's that
mhm,
whole, it was just we connected in a way,
mhm,
sort of she was quite an open, upfront person herself. But it was after session one, she was like, "You're gonna have to drive me a little bit, challenge me a bit more thoroughly." That I was like, "Okay, then let's go for that." So listening to what she wanted and how she wanted me to interact with her, I don't think I'd ever had a client sort of say, "I want you to be harder with me." So that was right. Like, why are you thinking like that? What will that result in? Let's try something a little bit more direct. And it just landed with her really well, and she
mm,
responded really well. So I guess it was listening to her sort of give me feedback on how she wanted to be. I mean, it was I do the disc analysis every time if the client agrees to it because it's a lot of box ticking. And the disc tool is basically a psychometric profile, as I'm sure you trained in this with the coaching academy as well. But just for your listeners, I actually used disc profiling when I worked in HR when I was looking at roles to recruit. I'd never disc profile people; it was always roles. So doing it within people, like with the coaching academy, they teach you how to do disc analysis to work out how people want to be communicated with and how they want to be communicated with, in my experience, isn't always how they think they need to be communicated with. So although I had the disc profile, I had to kind of go off piste a little bit because it obviously wasn't working the way that I wanted it to, you know. So that was a learn for me, that you can have these tools, but they don't work for everybody 100% of the time. And sometimes you have to be a bit more flexible with the tools that you use according to the client's requirements and what you think they, sort of will benefit them.
Mm,
So I think that I'd been coming into this relationship, I'd been quite focused on how this relationship should work and the coaching process. But actually, like seeing her flourish at the end of it, and me tweaking some of the tools that I'd had and some of the approaches I'd taken was absolutely, it was, of course, we should always tweak whatever we're doing according to the clients we've got because everyone's completely different. But I
mm,
can be quite, sort of a little bit neurodiverse in what I'm sort of, this is that and that's the other. So hearing her sort of talk about things after I'd sort of changed these approaches was a real big learning curve for me as well, realizing that you need to be a bit more organic in your approach to people because no two people are the same, and the more you get to know someone, the more they trust you and the more information you get. So you
mm,
can work with that, but you have to be on the ball and quite flexible with it.
mm. Wonderful. Thank you, Amanda. I mean, two things are really striking me there as you were talking was the energy and passion and joy you have in your coaching, but also, I guess, a reminder to me that coaching is about learning to how to best relate to each other, your client to you as coach and you as coach to the client, and that's what makes it work.
Yeah, absolutely. You really do. I think every single client I've ever had, I've definitely, I've been a cheerleader for them afterwards. Make sure you keep in touch. Make sure you let me know when things are happening and da. I want to know how you're doing. I'm sort of now connected to you.
Hmm. Fantastic. Okay, so we are running up to the edge of our time today now, Amanda. So thank you so much for guesting on Case by Case Series 5 of 2020 Coaching Convos. Just one thing before we go, can you tell us how, we'll make sure we put this on the description as well, but can you tell us how you can be contacted and if there are any sort of upcoming things other than your speaking arrangements that you've got in the pipeline?
No, nothing at the moment in terms of things that I've got coming up outside of those three things. But I can be contacted on my website, www.pauseandempower.com. I'm also on LinkedIn, Amanda Connolly, Connolly. That's under Pause and Empower as well. I did initially go with Instagram, but I realised my clients aren't on Instagram, and I don't think it's any good for my mental health. So they're the only two platforms really, my own website and LinkedIn.
Perfect. So thank you, Amanda Connolly of Pause and Empower. I've just got to take a pause after that title as well. And thank you to listeners and watchers. If you like what you see and hear, please like, subscribe, and share. And tell me what you want to hear more about in 2020 Coaching Convos with me, Julie Crabb.